everybody. So we're just waiting for Christi to join. Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
Me? Yeah. This one doesn't help you out like Zoom does. Make you look a little nicer.
Oh. I do actually have a background if you would like one.
Yeah.
It's a wild pony.
Okay.
That's a
Perfect.
picture I took. Let's see if I can. I don't know if I can give you a background. Or if it'll just. Oh, it's just all the way on the back. Well, let's see. Yeah, I don't know if you have the options to change that at all on yours. Okay, so unfortunately,
No.
I'm going to exit out of it real quick. Instagram is not connecting, so I got a new link to try that again.
Okay.
Okay, because I don't think I can edit it from here. Oh, okay. So I'm going to hop out real quick and then come back in.
Okay.
I don't know if that'll kick you out. It might. But I think
if it does,
you should be able to use the same link.
Put the same thing in? Okay. I want something to set this on top of the tissue box. Good. Settings, video.
Okay, well, I don't think we're getting Instagram.
Oh, bummer. Oh, well.
That's okay. I posted on our story. I'll do it again, too.
Okay.
Just to let people know to come find us on YouTube or Facebook. All right, and then so we have some fun little.
Cool.
Some of these.
Oh, I like those. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. I feel like
That's
that'll work.
nice. Okay.
All right. I'm going to post this to our story real quick. Remind people to come over here.
Okay. Oh, those are sheds. Okay.
They're what?
I was like, where are those horns? I was trying to figure out what the
Oh,
screen was doing right behind me.
growing horns.
Yeah.
All right. We've got 2 more minutes.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember how I chose the background. Oh, Sierra says, I'll be listening, driving
I
home.
can see that. Yeah. Okay, good. Oh,
Unload water. I'm surprised you have water and it's not like just ice. That's been our life.
what's that?
That's been our life. It's been so cold.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
brutal here, and we have a lot of snow. I don't know what you guys have, but
We have a lot
have
for us,
insane
yeah,
amounts of snow.
which is
The
good.
snow is 3 feet deep in the yards.
Wow.
That's unusual for here. Yes.
Wow.
So
Yeah, we don't have that much, but Laramie's
fine.
dry. So
There we go. I can see my glasses are at a weird space right now. Where I can see but I can't see. Sierra. I know Sierra, so
above 20.
yeah.
That's good. Yeah, we hit 30 today and it felt amazing.
Did it?
And our
I
waterers
am
are
not sure what it
unfrozen.
was here.
We had 2
What's that?
waterers break. We had 2 waterers freeze up yesterday, so we were playing
Oh,
the
no.
shift horses around game and
Yeah.
kind of stuff. All right.
Are we live? Are we going?
I think so. So we hit 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So I will start by just telling a little bit about us. So we are Mountain Shadows Equine Revival, and I'm the founder and still volunteer with the board and help a lot with their horse training. And I'm Sarah. And we are a nonprofit horse rescue located in Laramie, Wyoming. We are a 501c3. And our birthday is coming up. We're almost 4. And we quickly grew to I think we're the most active horse rescue in the state, which is saying a lot because our capacity is really low. So we have a capacity of about 11 horses at a time. And we're trying to grow that, but we need, we're going through some growing pains right now. We need our own facility and stuff like that to make it work. And some paid employees would be nice, but I think nonprofits are all on the same page with that.
I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're just about to turn 4. We currently have 11 horses in our care and have almost as many on the surrender wait list. We primarily serve Wyoming because it is such an underrepresented area. It's really hard for people in Wyoming if they're having problems, financial problems or health problems. Like, what do you do with your horse if you suddenly can't care for it? A lot of people, unfortunately, are left to either send it to the livestock auction, which are frequented by kill buyers, or unfortunately, sometimes they may feel that they have to dump them on federal land. A little segue into our conversation today. So one of the biggest hot button topics right now in the horse world is what we're doing with the wild horses. And I know we hear a lot from every angle. We hear a lot of people saying that, demonizing one group of people or another and saying the wild horses are starving. The wild horses are not starving. They should all live wild and free and nobody should ever touch them, or they should be managed because they're hurting the environment, or they're overpopulated so they're not getting the resources they need. And there's a lot of misinformation and conflicting information. And so Christi has joined me from WyWHIP, which is the Wyoming Wild Horse Improvement Partnership. And she's a lot more of an expert on this kind of stuff than I am.
Thank you.
And so I would like to kind of jump in. And Christi, why don't you introduce the Wyoming Wild Horse Improvement Partnership, what you guys do, and what your goals are.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you having this kind of a forum on Facebook and everywhere else that it's going to be streamed, because these conversations really need to be had at this point in time so that solutions are found. I need to put my glasses on. I didn't want to have to do this, but because I don't like the way I look in them, but can't read. So I'd like to just tell you really quick about WyWHIP. WyWHIP is, I'm the founder of WyWHIP. My partner in this is Mary Santagata. She lives in Connecticut, and she has a rescue also. Her rescue is all the King's Horses Equine Rescue. And so we've worked with her. It's really exciting to hear that there's a rescue in the state of Wyoming right now that understands this issue and that we can start working with. I think it's a big part of the solution. So the mission of Wyoming Wild Horse Improvement Partnership, our mission statement is balanced ecosystems, thriving horses. In Wyoming, as WyWHIP, as we are starting out, our intention is that we would like to set an example for other areas within our state to take a more holistic approach in the management of wild horses. And this requires being educated about all aspects of this and having a good working knowledge of the other industries that are involved, because there are the livestock industry is involved, oil and gas industry is involved, tourism is involved. Wildlife conservation is involved in this. We need to have a good solid base on soil and plant sciences, water, biology, and so much more, because the horses share land with a lot of other things. I mean, it's everything from other animals to other industries to the human that's on the landscape. So we're advocates for the individual, meaning everybody involved in this complex situation is an individual with their own thoughts, their own emotions, and their own needs. And so we've collaborated with a lot of experts and continue to do so on all of the topics that I mentioned above. Our intention is to learn everything we can possibly learn about anything that could affect the animals on the range, specifically the horses, but anything else that lives there. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We have a lot of projects that we're working on, a lot of things that we're doing.
Okay. It sounds like it's a big project.
Oh gosh, very big. Very, very big.
Yeah, hearing you guys, like all the just different moving parts that you're going through and having to work with is a lot.
Yes, it really is.
So we often hear about the wild horse, and a lot of people, I think, when they hear about that, automatically think about the BLM, which is the Bureau of Livestock Management, and the wild horses that are federally managed on those federal properties. But there's also wild horses in like Forest Service lands and some others. So what dictates as a wild horse, and what populations are you guys looking to help?
Okay, good question. So the Free Roaming Wild Horse and Burro Act defines wild horses as unbranded, unclaimed, free roaming horses and burros found on public lands within the United States. That's their definition. That is the definition of the act that was, that went through Congress. So this can apply to horses on BLM herd management areas, which are called HMAs, or the Forest Service territories, national parks. And also, it actually applies to tribal reservations, although that is more of a Bureau of Indian Affairs designation. So it kind of, out of respect for the indigenous people in our country, I don't, that's not necessarily what they call them. So I think we need to be mindful of what those people feel too. And the fact that a lot of the BLM land, a lot of the Forest Service land was originally their home as well. So the public themselves feel like this could mean any horse that's roaming free, and that's not the case. And part of this problem is because we have wild horses that are on maybe private land or BLM land, and then they cross over from private land to the BLM land. And we also have the dumping of domestic horses that can then breed with wild horses. And then is that really a wild horse? I feel like it is because it was born wild, but there's just a lot of stuff that goes along with this. So it's not an easy answer. A lot of this comes, a lot of the problem that we have right now is that people breed and manage horses irresponsibly. So they're straying from the private lands, like I said. Maybe the landowner's not watching their fence as well. Maybe we've seen cases where people actually transport their horses to tribal lands or to private sections or state sections or BLM land or Forest Service land, and they let them loose. And of course, that's illegal. And if you're caught doing that, there are repercussions, but it's very hard to catch that. So a lot of times they're termed feral horses, which is not an inappropriate terminology. In some cases, it's not an untruth, but in, nationally, that's a very contested thing. It's a hot topic as to which is which.
Yeah, and I hear a lot about like the Wyoming checkerboard, and I think I could be totally wrong on this, but I think it's a lot of like the red desert, or maybe not red desert, but that area has a lot of the checkerboard, and a lot of those horses are like looking at removal. Is that due to some of that being private property?
Yes, it actually is. So I'll talk about that really quick. Wild horses that are on the checkerboard land, that's a lot of salt wells and Divide Basin HMA. There's a little bit of it in Lost Creek, but not very much. I think, and I might be wrong on that. Lost Creek is part of the Red Desert proper. White Mountain HMA is a lot of checkerboard too. So Salt Wells and White Mountain, I think, are the most contested because there is a lot of checkerboard land within those HMAs, and they're highly accessible horses to the public. So you see a lot of people going out to see those horses. The Curlies are in the Salt Wells. They're very popular. People really like them because they're unique and different. So you see a lot of folks who go out to visit those horses, and they're photographed, and people see them. They want, when they travel through those areas, they want to go see those horses in person. And one problem you run into is a lot of times people don't realize that they're trespassing on public pieces of land. And we have actually seen people who consider themselves advocates, people who consider themselves to be in favor of the wild horses. They get into arguments with the private landowners about this, and then they actually can cause damage to those public lands. And unfortunately, when they cause damage to those public pieces or those private pieces of land, not only is that destruction of property, but it's tearing up the habitat for so much of what else lives in that area. And so it can be harming the sagebrush, which is an important component of the ecosystem. That's really important for the grasses. Sagebrush, they've done a lot of studies on this over the years, and they've actually found that for the native grasses, sagebrush is really important. And so whether it's private or public pieces of land, when people are on those and they're driving off of the designated roads, or they're maybe there's a mud hole and they get stuck, or something like that, they are actually tearing up things. And a lot of traffic has an impact on those lands. It can also bring in invasive grasses on wheels, tires. Vehicles can transport a lot of invasive species into and dump them there. And then when they're killing the sagebrush and other things, it leaves a vector, it leaves an open space for those invasive species to come in. So it's really hard. I mean, it's a really hard thing. It's a hard one to answer,
And for anybody who doesn't know and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll shoot for it since you've been talking a lot. The checkerboard is a literal checkerboard of, like, is it federal land and then private land?
Yeah. So it's BLM land and then it's a private section. So you have it in a checkerboard pattern. And the state of Wyoming, this is checkerboard lands are sort of a bad situation all the way around. In Wyoming, it's not just the wild horses that create a problem. Hunting, people want access to the public land. They have to go across private land. And I think what I'm trying to convey here is that we really, really need to be very thoughtful and very respectful of the private sections of land. They are not marked, but it is on us to know where those pieces of land are. And if you're out there, you really do need to know where that's at, and you really need to be respectful of it, because fighting with the landowner is only going to shut us off from that. And that doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit us. It doesn't benefit the horses. We do need to be out there seeing how they're doing. We need to be monitoring them. And if the public is shut off from that land, they're shut off. And it's in the courts right now on a completely different subject. It doesn't even have anything to do with horses. So it's not just wild horses.
No, I know. I have a little bit of wind energy background, and it's also a problem with putting up farms. Okay, so one of the biggest things we hear, and the need, the reasons for needing to manage these horses, is typically the numbers. I see a lot of studies and articles about how, the Wyoming, or not necessarily Wyoming, but the wild horse numbers are, getting too big. And therefore the horses are overgrazing. And, what are the actual population trends of the wild horses? Like, are they actually increasing that much? Or, some people claim that it's due to us cutting their land or turning out too many cows. So what is that actual population figure of the wild horses? and that change in
So,
that.
yeah, oh, I didn't write down my figures, but
If you need to
I
screen
think,
share or anything too.
what's that?
If you need to share any screen share or
Yeah, I don't have that one up for screen share, but I could probably pull it up somewhere. Um, the I think the figure nationally is that there are, I think, I'm not sure if it's 70, and I know this is kind of a big gap, but it's between 70 and 90,000 wild horses and burros across the nation. In Wyoming, I'm gonna say that the state of Wyoming as a whole probably has close to 10,000 horses living as a wild horse. That includes tribal land, and that includes the state and private lands, and that also includes the BLM land. So there shouldn't be more than, I think that the total for Wyoming is just over 3,000 is as far as what it should be managed for. I do have that on, can I share it? Let me see. How do I screen share?
there might be a button down below the video that has like a square and an arrow pointing up.
Okay, that, oh, no, that's private chat for me. That says private chat. Oh, there it is. Okay. Allow.
Yeah, I think your view looks a little different than mine. Okay.
Yes. All right.
We have an inception here.
Is it, it, okay. I can hear myself twice.
Yeah, so go ahead and just click off of the video. There you go.
Sorry for my weird look there. Oh gosh, that's even worse. All right. Okay. Does that help at all? Are you seeing that screen?
Mm-hmm.
That says WyWHIP? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me find it here because I do have this figure. So this is off of our website directly. And so, yes, the appropriate management level of horses in the state of Wyoming is 3,725 horses. Okay, so I'm going to stop screen sharing now. If I can get back there, I have to put that down and then. Okay, did that work? No.
I can kick you off of screen sharing.
Okay, there we go. All right.
I have the power.
That was scary. Okay. So 3,700 horses. They removed a significant number of horses in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Actually, I don't think they did any removals in 2022 in Wyoming. But they removed a significant number of horses from the Red Desert Complex and then also from the area around Rock Springs, the Rock Springs area. They also removed some from the McCullough Peaks, but I'm going to speak about Stewart Creek just because that's our area of expertise. And so Stewart Creek Herd Management Area, the AML, which is appropriate management level. The AML for Stewart Creek is between 125, 175 horses. When they removed, they took, I want to say over 400 horses, but it was over 2 years because they started to gather in 2020 and then actually they started to gather in 2019. They took some and then they took more again in 2021 when they gathered. And so, or 2020 when they gathered then. And all told, I want to say it was a lot closer to 500 horses that they removed from Stewart Creek. And they hadn't done a removal from that area since like 2013 2013, I think. And I may be wrong on that, but I think 2013 was the last time they'd done a removal, and they removed to low AML. So you can see how in approximately 10 years time, that population had essentially quadrupled. And they say that it doubles every 3 years. Sorry, I have somebody trying to call me. They say it doubles every 4 years. The population will double every 4 years. So, that can really start to add up. And that is what we see. And the reason for 4 years is that if you have half the mares and half the mares have foals in year one, then half of those foals will probably be mares also, but they won't be breeding until, further down the road. And not every foal survives. Not every mare is going to have a foal. So you have a lot of, staggering, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have some that die from predation. Not very many. That is not an answer. That is not a part of the solution at all. It's just not enough. It's never going to be enough. Those animals aren't going to prey. They're opportunistic and they're not going to prey on the animals. Back to the population, when they removed over 500 horses from Stewart Creek or close to that. That was in 2021. I would say we're already at 200 horses in Stewart Creek at this point. And when I threw out the figure before of close to 10,000 in the state of Wyoming, that does include tribal horses, and they are in the act of removing those horses right now, a lot of them. So I hope that answered the question the right way. I hope that made sense to people.
Yeah, okay. So like the population is really
there's a lot.
Really growing. We did actually have a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
So Sue asked about you mentioned the sagebrush and protecting that, and they said if the sagebrush is important, why are they spraying it to eradicate it?
I don't know that they're spraying it to eradicate it because and I think I don't know that they're doing that in Wyoming. I think they might do that in some places for to open up more grass. But in talking to the people that I've spoken to, the sagebrush is very important for a number of reasons. When this is a great example this winter. We've had so much snow, but the snow and the wind in Wyoming, the sagebrush comes in and it packs in around that plant, and that plant has a really, really deep taproot. And when you see a sagebrush that is about 2 feet tall, that plant is probably over 100 years old. They live for a really long time, and they don't grow quickly, obviously, but they provide shade and they provide moisture for a lot of other things, the other plants that come in. And if you go sit down out on the desert anywhere in the red desert, and specifically in, I don't try to be an expert about anywhere else. It's just Wyoming that's my area. And if you go sit down out there and you look at a sagebrush plant and you're sitting there, it's sort of like a big tree in the ecosystem. And I did go to a talk by a person about the sagebrush sea, and it is the second largest living ecosystem experiencing loss, second only to the rainforest. So wow. The rate of loss and the impact to our planet of sagebrush habitat loss is second only to the rainforest. And it's just kind of on a microscopic scale, everything is just a lot smaller than what you see in the rainforest. And that's because we're in a desert area. We're in an area that doesn't get the resources as much. So it's quite a bit. It's pretty significant.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So this might kind of tie into my next question, which is, what is the impact of the wild horses on the land and other species?
Okay. You mean other species impact
Yeah.
or
So
the
there's
horses impacting?
how does the wild horse population impact some of the more native species and their natural habitat? Um,
Okay.
More or less so than cattle. I know there's a lot of people who kind of try to say that cows are more destructive to the environment. Cows are not as destructive to the environment. Cows,
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do wild horses kind of affect the the rest of the ecosystem out there?
Okay. And that's a great question. So, you know, every space is different and unique. And when I answer a question like this, what I'm saying doesn't necessarily apply to all of it. It should be an answer specific to one area, and yet that's hard to do too because I deal with more than one area. So I'm I am dealing, I look at each area for itself. Um, in Stewart Creek, because that's where I do most of the work, that WyWHIP does, we have actually seen that the horses are providing for, say, the sage grouse. Um, there was some talk years ago that the horses were impacting them negatively because they crossed the nests and they destroyed eggs and they impacted the leks. So the sage chickens strut to find their mates, and then they go off and they mate, and then they have the nests and all that stuff. And so they did a lot of studies in Stewart Creek, and I talked to some of the people who were there doing those studies. They were part of University of Utah, actually, and they told us, we think that the horses actually are providing some things, as do cattle, for uh, the sage grouse, because those I'm not seeing a huge impact. I see a lot of sage grouse where the horses are at. And again, it's a balanced thing. If you have too many, though, you are going to have those instances where that is going to be a problem. But when the horses poop, their feces lays on the ground and it attracts bugs, and there are eggs in it, parasite eggs and things like that in the horse's feces, in the cow feces, and there are other bugs that are attracted to it, and that's a huge source of food for those little babies, the baby sage chickens. So it's actually providing, it provides a food source for them, and an easily accessible food source for them. So that's one area where, it works in balance, and that's what we want to see is, and we would like to see more research done about this. Where are these things helping? Where's the balance coming? When is it too much? When do we need to make the adjustments on how the horses are impacting the home that they're in, because they are sharing it with other animals. There are sage chickens, there are other birds, there are bugs, there are insects that are very vital to the whole, everything, pollination and all of that. There are elk and deer and bighorn sheep and antelope and predators that share that space with those horses. Now, the bighorn sheep, that's on the reservation. That's not in Stewart Creek. Um, but Stewart Creek has a lot of elk. And another thing that I see, uh, both good and bad, is that when there are too many horses, you don't see as many elk. And when the horses' numbers, when they did the gather and they removed, we started seeing more elk in the HMA. And I think that elk moving through does bring some predators in, which are helpful to population control. Again, that is not going to be a silver bullet in any way, shape, or form, because those predators are opportunistic. They do not pull down a full grown horse. It's too dangerous for them, unless that horse is injured or compromised in some way. And they're going to do it that way. And it's the same for the elk, and it's the same for other animals that are out there. But Stewart Creek does have mountain lions in it. Wolves have crossed Stewart Creek. They've been in that area. So we do know that they've gone through there. There are black bears that sometimes are found in that area too. They're more rare. And black bears, again, they're more of a scavenger. They're not a predator, but they, opportunistic. It can happen. So, another thing that I see that is beneficial is that during foaling season, the horses all gather in one spot in Stewart Creek to have their foals together in one big group, and you start seeing a lot of elk in that same area having their calves, and you see a lot of antelope having their babies too. Sorry, I have dogs that are getting anxious right now, so it's dinner time, and where's our dinner? I missed it. I should have fed them beforehand, but they'll be fine. So you see the antelope having their babies where the horses are, and the elk having their babies, and the deer are migrating through. So they're usually there's not a resident deer population in Stewart Creek, but there are in other parts. And so my thought behind it is that they, the horses are pretty hard on coyotes. They can be really hard on canines and coyotes and mountain lions. So that's why it's more, there's safety in numbers.
Yeah.
But the detriments to it, we have there's only so many resources out there. So if there's too many horses and they're eating all of the food, then those other animals don't have the food accessible to them. So that's another one. Water is a huge thing. And yes, the horses will run elk, deer, cattle, antelope off of the water sources. I live in Lander, Wyoming right now, and I have had conversations with an organization here called Water for Wildlife, and they put in a lot of wildlife guzzlers for specifically antelope to keep, to give them water sources out on the desert. And they, the horses are really hard on those. The horses will come in and, cattle are just as hard on a lot of those things too. But the horses are a little more resourceful. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, I think, because I know you wanted to get into some other solutions, but there's a guy that I'll mention this right now. There's a guy in New Mexico who's building systems to dart horses, and their remote delivery. They're a completely remote system. It's a bait trap system. Nobody has to be there. The horses come in, they get darted and they leave. They can leave anytime they want to. It's a great, it's a brilliant system. I'm very impressed with what this guy's built. But the horses are so destructive that he had to get hurricane strength steel and in a roller window, it's like a window, a shutter thing system, so that he could completely block off the hay for the bait. They use alfalfa bales. And he had to get something that the horses couldn't, they get up there and they paw at it and get into this, they were pretty destructive. So he had to go pretty heavy duty to have it survive the horses. So they can be destructive to property as well, and water.
Yeah.
That's any horse.
Even domestic ones are.
Right? Right.
So it sounds like you really focus on Stewart Creek. Where in the state is Stewart Creek? Just to kind of give Stewart Creek HMA.
Yeah. Stewart Creek is about 22 miles north of Rawlins off of Highway 287. It would be on the west side of the highway. And it stretches towards the west, and I believe it's 168,000 acres.
Okay.
I'm not sure of the square mileage, but
for anybody who isn't, familiar with Wyoming, Rawlins is in the south central area of Wyoming, and so just a little of that. Okay.
Yep, south side, right off of I-80.
So we've talked kind of a lot about, I guess, why maybe we should manage the wild horses, and but Wyoming has been kind of talking about using slaughter as a way to manage these numbers, but there should be a lot of other options, right?
Yeah.
So I know, a few of the different options that are out there are different types of birth control to help just control how fast these horses can reproduce.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of like the darting with PCP? What are the pros
Yeah.
and cons on that?
Okay. So darting is actually there are only two that can be darted, and that's native PZP and Gonacon. And they work differently. PZP is a porcine zona pellucida, so it's pig ovaries, and they make a vaccine out of pig ovaries essentially. And what that vaccine does is cause the zona pellucida, which is the kind of the membrane that surrounds every egg in different species, and that's the membrane that the sperm will penetrate, causes that membrane to become a lot harder, so that the sperm can't penetrate it. And the mare will still ovulate. Everything still functions as normally. It's just that the sperm can't penetrate, and
Hmm.
that's how zona pellucida works, or PZP. And that is also how. So that's native PZP, and then there's PZP 22, which is they hand inject that one typically. And PZP 22 works in the same way, but they have a pelletized. It's the um, essentially the liquid form, and then there's a pelletized form that's sort of slow releases to continue that, to stimulate that immune response, to create that hardening around the egg, the membrane of the egg. Gonacon works a little differently in that it's a hormone interceptor, so it stimulates an immune response. It's also a vaccine, so that stimulates an immune response, and that immune response creates production or overproduction of, and I can't remember the name of the hormone off the top of my head, but it's the hormone that tells the body that it's pregnant. So there's a stimulation of that, so the ovulation isn't occurring.
Hmm.
And it was, I talked to CSU pretty extensively about it to learn about it. CSU is where it was developed, and the one of the vets I spoke with, his explanation to me made sense in that, a mare's body is designed to be pregnant essentially 365 days of the year. And so the foaling or the gestation period is about 360 days. I think it's a little less, but there's a range in there. So 11 months ish. And it goes a little bit above 11 months is how long a mare is pregnant. And so then she comes into her full heat immediately, and she should be bred immediately. And then, that's the way her body's working, is that she should be bred immediately. And so she's now in full again and not
Mhm.
cycling for that 11 plus months. So it stops the body from cycling. The mare thinks she's pregnant. She is happy because her body's in the state that it wants to be in. Gonacon can be darted, and that is the only vaccine that can be used in this system at this time, that the guy I was telling you about. It's wildlife management systems, and the only one he can use is Gonacon in that, because of the location of the dart. In his system, it darts in the shoulder, and they want it darted in the hip for PZP. And that is because of the problems that they've had seeing, the problems that have come up with abscessing. So if PZP, and that's what I've been told. And there's a few other things to it, but it's mostly when it's given in certain locations, there's more of an opportunity for an abscess to occur, and they want to reduce that. and particularly for animals on the range. So Gonacon needs to be hand injected if possible, and PZP 22 needs to be hand injected if possible, in the hip rather than in the shoulder. He's working on, I think, things to maybe change that. I don't know. It's pretty costly for him. But I also know that the Science and Conservation Center might be working on, I mean, they're working on some different forms of birth control too, changing PZP to be a little better. I mean, they're constantly working on improving these things. It's coming down the pike that there will be some more options. PZP, Gonacon, work differently too in the length of time. PZP is more reversible. If you give up to 4 applications, it becomes less reversible than initially. And Gonacon has been shown, the research studies are showing that Gonacon lasts a little longer. So you would not want to be using Gonacon in younger mares because it can make them permanently sterile. So, a thoughtful program really should be looking at using everything that we have available and applying it thoughtfully. Older mares getting Gonacon, or I know that you want to ask about permanent sterilization too. And I'm not opposed to permanent sterilization for older mares either, because that lets them stay on the range. I don't like the idea of IUDs. I don't think IUDs have been proven safe enough yet. But those are some.
I didn't even know that was a possibility.
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
giving a horse
Spaying
an
of
IUD.
mares. Yeah, spaying of mares. And there are 3 different procedures, and I have to admit that I am not up to all of those procedures yet. But I have people within our organization that have a better grasp of that and how it works. So
yeah, I know historically, and this was 10 plus years ago, the spaying of mares was just a very big big surgery that was really hard for a female horse to come back from, because horses just don't do well with surgeries that kind of knock them out. But I hear they've been coming out with a lot of new procedures and that can cause a lot less damage, have a lot smaller of an incision, a lot less recuperation time and stuff like that.
Right. And some of those procedures are sort of like what human women get. So it's kind of like a tubal ligation sort of thing, versus a complete hysterectomy. And yeah, there are some, and the same with stallions. So there isn't any kind of darting for stallions on the range yet, but they are looking into, I know that, we've attended some conferences on fertility control in horses, basically in wildlife, because many of these applications are also good for other species. And coincidentally, PZP was initially for being looked at as a human birth control, but it's not anymore because it doesn't work as well in humans or primates. So it's not being looked at in that respect anymore. The gelding of horses, now that's pretty invasive procedure too. They do have to be sedated for that. It is a complete removal of the testicles, and so that does affect hormone production in a male horse. And a lot of the stallion-like behavior that we want to see is gone. So the protective things, the fighting for the mares, the band, the leadership types of things that you want to see on the range, that those behaviors go away when a horse is gelded, which is why we geld a lot of our horses in domestic life, because we don't want those behaviors as much. On the range, there are some sort of vasectomy type procedures where you're not completely removing the testicles, and so that hormone production is still there. And that is there have been some studies done on that, and there have been some favorable results from that. So again, that's another possibility. And if you're using all of these tools very thoughtfully in a program on one herd, you can maintain genetic viability, you can keep horses on the range longer, and you can reduce herd growth through using all of these things. But it takes a lot of manpower. It takes having a facility close by available for those horses to recover in. It's not feasible to remove a horse from the range and to take it a fair distance away from its home range for these procedures to be done. And a lot of times when you do apply the vaccine to a mare, she needs a booster shot of that vaccine within 30 to 60 days. And so, there's that, how do you find that mare on the range again, unless you really know the patterns? And then are you going to have them in a position to dart? Darting is not easy. You don't just go out and shoot a horse. You have to go out and you really have to be, you have to know that that's the horse you want to dart. She has to stand in a specific way that the dart's going to actually inject and get rid of the, it's going to go into her system. And then you have to recover the dart and then you have to pretend like you weren't a part of this, because if you don't pretend like you weren't a part of this, they're like, that person bit me somehow. I'm not sure what happened, but I didn't like it and I'm not going to do it again. And they get wise to that. So you have to be, there's a procedure and it's not easy. So there's a reason that they are very regulated. All of this is very, very regulated. So I think there are a lot of pros and cons to all of them, but they need to be used in a very thoughtful way. And younger mares, I feel like PZP is the option. I feel like middle-aged mares, maybe Gonacon is a good option, and older mares, Gonacon and or permanent sterilization is an option. And I feel like vasectomizing and gelding could be an option to keep some of the older horses on the range, or horses that, we see stallions out there sometimes that don't care if they have a band of mares. They just don't care. They just sort of shadow everybody and they're never really a part of anything. And we see bachelor groups that, might have a horse that constantly stays in that bachelor group for years and years and years and never moves on. Great candidate for a gelding.
And so WyWHIP does some, like one of your guys' missions is you have volunteers go out and actually dart the horses.
Yes.
Correct?
So we have 3 volunteers right now who are certified. Well, we have more, but with our particular program, we have 3 volunteers at this point. And they're all certified to dart, and we are working with the BLM in Stewart Creek. That's why that's my area of expertise.
Okay. And so what are some, like, you guys have to go find the horse again after that initial period and dart it twice? Like, that sounds very hard.
Yeah. You got to know the horses. You have to know their, to be successful, you really do. You have to know the horses. You have to know their routines. And they do. They all have it. So, yeah.
And is it your guys' goal to continue to help in that manner and do other HMAs as well?
Yes. Yeah. We would like to, we'd like to really develop a concrete program in Stewart Creek and then see it move outward to other places. We would like to work with tribal youth, because the Wind River Indian Reservation here has such a problem of wild horses right now. And these are horses that were dumped on the range, dumped on tribal lands, or mismanaged on tribal or adjoining lands to tribal. It's not just tribal people. So they are areas where things are, mismanaged. It gets out of balance, period. Right now on the range, I'm sort of seeing some of the pop-ups. On the range, wild horses are the only thing that are not managed. I see that Dwayne came in with a comment about that. And wild horses on the range at this point are the only unmanaged species. Every other species on the range, and if you want to go to the true definition of wild, our wildlife is truly wild. They are managed, and they're managed through hunting, they're managed through
Mhm.
culling, they're managed through a lot of other things. And so the horses are the only thing that are not managed right now on the range. I mean, it depends
Well,
on the location, but yeah,
yeah.
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 So there isn't a true management program. They aren't hunted. You can't hunt them. I don't want to see hunting. So yeah,
So there's kind of a few other ways that they're managed that I think the general population tends to see a little bit more. And a couple of those are adoption, having a
yeah, the
Mustang
removal.
and yeah, and so getting horses from the roundups and having a Mustang is becoming a more popular
Thing.
thing than it has been in the
Yeah,
past, with all the
right.
Mustang makeovers. And this
Yeah.
pretty girl is actually take a
Oh,
minute to talk about her. So this is Gian. She's one of the rescues
gorgeous.
at our horse rescue. So she's a 24-year-old Mustang, and she was, I don't remember the HMA, but she is a Wyoming Mustang. Yeah, we
Beautiful.
ended up taking her in from a law enforcement seizure case, unfortunately, and she had to have an eye removed. But she's doing really good now. She's actually available for adoption. Yeah,
Nice. Okay.
really, really
Somebody needs to
sound, loves
her.
to go. Not a beginner horse. She loves
Right.
to go. But yeah, so they can make wonderful horses. I know people are using them as police horses, and
Hmm.
the BLM is using them to help round up other wild horses. Like, can you imagine how trained that horse would have to be to like not go with the horses that it used to?
But I'm just gonna quickly interject here that there's a campaign, and we're gonna put a link on our website really quick, or soon, really soon. There's a great little documentary film coming out, Women in the Wilderness. So think about women in the wilderness. And these three girls loved wild horses. They worked here in Wyoming, and so they wanted to raise awareness for this. So they did a documentary film, and this is the push to help them through the final production costs. And they did such an amazing job. They rode wild horses across Wyoming in some of the worst weather ever. It was
Oh, I think I
terrible.
saw this when they
I
were doing it.
Yeah, and
I
I
think I
and
saw
I
them on
I I think
Facebook.
I shared some of it with you too, but these girls did this and they lost their horses at one point. A wild herd came in and stampeded their horses off, and they couldn't find them. And so they had to go back to Rock Springs, and I think they were staying in Rock Springs, and they were driving out every day to find the horses. And their horses backtracked 50 miles to find them, went back along the trail 50 miles looking for their girls when they could have stayed with the wild horses. They could have stayed with those wild herds, but they chose not to. They chose to go find their girls. And I mean, they form bonds. They form bonds with each other, and they form bonds with us. And we, one of the things that we talk about is not every wild horse wants to be wild. Their life out there sucks sometimes. I think about those horses out there right now, and it's bad. It is so bad. It is so cold. It's been brutally cold. And I know there are horses that are like, give me a barn, man. Just give me a barn and some hay. That's so much better. But there are horses that want to stay out there, and those horses should be allowed to stay out there. And again, if you know the horses out there and you know the individual personalities through a thoughtful program, you're going to know which ones would be better to be removed and be domestic than not.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'll bring up like the long-term holding. So a lot of horses that, they might bring in and remove off the range, and they might try to adopt them out, or
Mhm.
they possibly aren't adoptable for whatever reason, and they end up in the long-term holding. What does long-term holding mean? Like, what does it mean when a horse is in long-term holding?
So long-term holding isn't a bad deal because they are still living as a wild horse. They are gelded, if they're a stallion, to go into long-term holding. Wind River Wild Horse Sanctuary is a long-term holding facility. It's a great little facility. It's a great place. The horses, I like to go sit out there and watch them. They move like the wild horses did, and they out on the range, and they behave very much like the horses on the range do. They have their little groups of people, of different horses that they like, and they hang together and they interact and they play and they eat and they do what wild horses do. They are just not on the range anymore, but it's a beautiful scenery. They have hay brought to them. The long-term holding, I know they were putting out contracts a while back, and I read through it, and I've talked to the man who's responsible for a lot of those contracts, and they have to have 8 months of natural food. So that's grazing. They have to be able to graze naturally and ingest their food that way for at least 8 months out of the year. And then
They need a
supplement
big
eating.
place.
What's that?
Which means they need a very big place.
Oh yeah, huge.
to have that
Absolutely.
forage.
And they need the ability to move around. They have to be able to move, and they need so many acres per horse. And absolutely, it's they're big. They're big pastures.
Okay.
And a lot of them are in the Midwest, where traditionally the horses were in the great big herds. They're not in those places anymore because they're all settled. It's all private land there. They don't have BLM land in Kansas and Oklahoma. I mean, they do, but not to the extent that we do in the western states. Texas, they don't have those big tracts of land that are private or public anymore. So, but that's where the horses initially came from. That's where they were in those great big herds that everybody wants to see. So now they're back there. They're just on somebody's private pasture, and somebody's getting paid for that. So, and I see it as a win. So,
as long as the money continues to come.
There's a lot of money involved in that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm reading this comment.
Okay.
Say managed horses are not wild horses.
Yeah, that was the one. That was Dwayne that I was referring to earlier. Yeah. And I agree with Dwayne that people are out of touch with wildness. So they don't have a clue anymore. And human intervention has been the absolute destruction of wild places.
Yeah, and I mean, humans, unfortunately, it is our world now. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. It depends, I guess. It's kind of nice to be at the top of the food chain, but then unfortunately, the rest of the world is subject to our whims. And I don't know. I see animals are no longer living in their own world. They're living in a human world.
All animals, yes, they are, sadly.
Because that's a lot of what I do. So I train a lot of horses, and horses typically are only valuable if they're valuable to our human world.
Yes.
So like we end up getting a lot of feral horses. They're not wild, but they may be 10, 15 years old and have never been touched by a human or never been touched gently. They're mares that are raised on these huge ranches that are just turned out with a stud, and they come by and collect the babies every year. And these mares are never, they're never handled. And so we get a lot of these feral horses. And what is a not registered, not touchable 12-year-old mare worth? They don't know how to exist in the human world. All they've known is this kind of fake wild. And so that's my goal, is if I can teach them how to exist in this human world, then all of a sudden people like them. People want them. They're valuable. They're not getting shipped to Mexico or.
Yeah. And I think you just touched on part of that solution. People need to be more responsible about their own horses. They need to stop looking at them as a commodity. They're a life. They're a living, breathing being, and we have to stop treating them as if they're. I mean, there's a conversation to be had, and it's a long one, so we won't go into it too much. But Dominion
might have to be a sequel,
right? So people argue that God gave us dominion over the animals, but that does not mean that we're supposed to control everything that they do. It means we're supposed to take care of them. That's the way that I think it was intended, is that we're supposed to take care of them. We're supposed to provide for them the best that we can and make sure that their needs are met, whether they're wild or not. And we've failed that miserably. And the fact that this slaughter is even in front of the legislature, the idea of it is even there at this point, is really because, yeah, what you've got on the banner right there right now. I mean, the fact that it's even there is because of human greed and human irresponsibility. And no, what are we supposed to do with all these numbers? We do have ridiculous numbers, and where do they go? They're in
Mhm.
like 60, 70,000 horses in holding right now. And well, actually, I think it's 90,000. There's 90,000 horses in holding right now. And then you look at places like the Navajo Nation that is overrun with horses, and the Wind River Indian Reservation that's overrun with horses. And these places, and there are a lot of other tribal lands that have this same problem. What are these people supposed to do with these horses? And it's not even their fault. It is us, the stupid human beings again, that are dumping them in those places, and then they're breeding with their wild herds, and then they've got a whole suddenly they have a population explosion. So we don't, we've really got to be, we need to stop that culture. We need to stop it. We can do better by them. We really can. Sorry, I got off,
in many ways.
step off the soapbox right now.
That's okay. Yeah, so I think we're kind of out of time.
Yeah.
But if you guys like this kind of stuff, make sure to share the video and comment. It will be uploaded on Facebook. It will be uploaded on YouTube, and I might take a few sections and post them on Instagram and TikTok and all those places. And yeah, if there's a next time, I think it would be really fun to go a little bit more into what all of these different solutions that we currently have, what do they mean? The AIP program, the Adoption Incentive Program, has started getting a lot of flack because a lot of horses are ending up in the kill pens. And so, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Has it hurt more horses than it's helped, or helped more horses than it's hurt? And are there maybe better ways that we could make sure those adopted horses stay out of those kill pens, out of the auctions, out of Mexico?
I think
that's
that program had good intentions, but it has not necessarily. There's just bad characters that screw it up.
And it's not. I think our argument could also be made that the kill pen problem is a problem in itself, and that the Mustangs are falling into that trap, not necessarily that the AIP program is creating that trap. But
that was very well said. That was eloquent.
Well, the kill pen thing, that can be my soapbox for another day. That's something we fight against a lot, is just all the kill pen scams and the people people making money off of threatening horses and that kind of stuff. But I hope we get to talk more about that, and about more strategies to keep owners from dumping horses, and more ways that, how can we actually make birth control feasible? How can we actually implement it in a way that it's going to help, and we don't need to try to look to something like slaughter to try to control these horses' populations?
Yeah, because I think that, I'm not sure why some of this stuff isn't being used in domestic horses, in domestic horse populations a little more heavily, because that would help. That would help things a lot. I think it's cost prohibitive maybe, but it's conversations like this. We all need to sit down and have these conversations more and more and more. And I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it with anybody. I mean, you can message me on Facebook. It's Christi Chapman. And WyWHIP is there on my thing. I don't mind getting messages. You can message us at WyWHIP. Have conversations with us. Start conversations with us. We want to learn more about. We get tired of the same old of they all need to stay out there, and it gets to be so controversial. None of that is helpful. None of that is helpful. It just wastes our time. Don't waste our time. Don't talk down to us. Don't waste it. Let's really have meaningful conversations about this.
Is the proposed slaughter to reopen just solely over wild horse population or all horse population? As far as I understand it, it would be allowed for all horse population, but
Yes.
it's driven by the need for wild horses.
Yeah, and it's driven by the state legislature, I think, in response to the problem on the reservation, because and the dumping of horses, because when slaughter went away, that's when they started seeing these population explosions occurring. Management was a little bit better. For one, people weren't complaining about the removals as much, and the removals were happening, but they just weren't complaining about it because it wasn't as right in front of us. Social media changed all that. So there's a lot more protesting about it. There's a lot more negativity from the public. They don't like it. And so now we're seeing, these explosions are happening because of the horses being dumped in places. I mean, that's a big, huge contributing factor. And the fact that everybody is complaining more. So the BLM is like, we can't, I mean, every time they try to do removals, they get slapped with a lawsuit. Forest Service gets slapped with a lawsuit. BIA kind of does their own thing because nobody cares about that. But it's not even
who?
BIA, actually. BIA isn't the ones doing the removals on the reservations. That falls to Tribal Game and Fish. And they have a lot more on their plate than horses to deal with. They have usually two people, covering a huge, well, here it's two people and they cover this huge territory, and they really should be managing all the wildlife, and fish, not the wild horses. So they're kind of like, we've got this giant problem in front of us, and what do we do with it? And so, yeah, the legislature said, let's reopen slaughter, and then problem solved. We don't have all these horses anymore, but we can do better. I know we can.
Yeah, it's kind of a grisly solution.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, Christi, thank you for
joining
you
so much for this opportunity. This is great.
Yeah,
I love to talk about this stuff. You can tell. So, thank you.
Yeah, if you guys liked it, if you learned anything, let us know, and we can look at doing another one. We have more topics that we didn't.
Oh yeah,
we didn't get to, but that's okay.
Lots of topics. Never a shortage.
Yeah. But yeah, so thank you so much for everybody who joined, and yeah, be sure to like and share if you enjoyed and you thought the information was valuable. And Christi, I hope you have a good night. Thank you again.
All right, you too. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining us.